This is a Merrick Studios podcast. This week on Unglossy.
The jazz was always, that's really what I wanted to do. And so I would start hanging out in the jazz clubs or outside the door because they wouldn't let me in. I was too young, and then eventually just met the cats, the right cats to play with and just worked myself into the scene and became, by my mid-20s, I was a working jazz musician as well.
From the top.
Go ahead.
I'm Tom Frank.
I'm Jeffrey Sledge.
And I'm Bug B. Welcome to Unglossy.
Real stories, unfiltered dialogue, and the voices moving culture beyond the gloss of hype and headlines.
So buckle up, Unglossy starts now.
What's going on, fellas? We are back for another Unglossy. Quick announcement we got to say before we get to an amazing guest is the network launched another big show this week. So we launched the Heavy Hitter DJs podcast. Jeffrey, you got to fill us in on what that podcast is about.
With DJ Enough, who started the Heavy Hitters. He's the founder and the head of the Heavy Hitters Coalition, DJs Coalition. This is DJ Enough, Cast One, and DJ Camelo. Well, DJ Cast One and DJ Camelo, and L Bugs. And they're all heavy hitters, obviously. And they're doing a great show, and they're interviewing DJs and artists. And it's dope because there's a whole DJ kind of culture that people kind of don't think about. You see DJs in clubs obviously spinning, but you don't think about stuff that they're talking about, like from the technical side to like having to maybe get knee surgery because they stand on their feet, hours at a time each night and stuff. So there's all these kind of things that are going on, and they have great chemistry. And the show's so far been amazing. It's been amazing. It's just getting better. We have taped a good one today. We got a huge guest next week. So it's exciting.
And these guys, this is not like a put together team. This is a team that pretty much did this already in one format, and they just brought it over to Merrick.
Yes, they're on the radio. Camelo and Cast One are still on the radio. Enough's on Sirius sometimes. So yeah, these guys are professionals. They know what they're doing, and they're great. L Bugs is on Power 105, so they know what they're doing. They're great.
But they've all already kind of worked together, so conversation between them is super easy. Like that's why I say
they're family. They're like
great chemistry.
Yeah, we're just bringing them from one format to our studios.
Yes.
I love it.
Yes.
I love it.
Absolutely. So we're very excited about that, and I think speaking of big guests and guys who have done a lot of stuff for a lot of years, we got a good one today, folks. I want to welcome Mark Isham to the show. Mark, I got to give an introduction to you, though, because you don't really need an introduction, but I'm going to give one. If you've ever watched a film and felt something you couldn't explain, that's the kind of space this guy's been working in for a long time. He's a composer, a trumpeter, who scored everything from A River Runs Through It to Crash. But more than that, he's someone who's never stayed in one lane, moving through jazz, electronic, orchestra music, just chasing what feels right. So this is really about the kind of career, the long game, the pivots, and how you keep creating at a high level for decades. Mark, welcome to Unglossy.
Thank you very much, Thomas. Great pleasure to be here with all you gentlemen.
Thank you for showing up, Mark. This is going to be great.
My pleasure.
There's so much to get into. I start looking through all your films, and we'll get to those, but the list is
that's
endless.
heavy. That's ridiculous. It's a ridiculous amount of cinematography. Like I've seen at least 60% of the films that you've either scored or performed in. So
and that's a lot. Yeah.
It's extensive to say the least.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, thank you very, very much. It's been I gotta say, a satisfying career, and I didn't necessarily come to film music as my first choice, but when it presented itself, I threw myself in full-heartedly, and turns out I have a knack for it.
Kind of good at it.
You're pretty good at it.
Yeah. So let's rewind though, because we got to see where this came from. And as you said, this isn't something you just you knew you were going to do and jumped into. Yeah. What did music look like in the world that you grew up? Like, what was the influence? How did music become ultimately your career?
I was very fortunate. I've always known that I was going to be a musician. There's never been a plan B. There's never been anything else to fall back on. So it's always just been keep pushing at it. My mother says that I used to sit at the piano when I was 6 or 7 and tell little stories. And even when I couldn't play, I would, bad guy coming in, I'd hit the bottom notes, and the good guy comes in, I'd hit the top notes. I seem to always have an interest in programmatic music that tells a story. And so film music, obviously, as a genre over the last 100 years, has evolved to be the ultimate music that can help tell stories and tell stories on its own. And when coupled with picture, it becomes a very powerful tool for emotion and storytelling. And it's just something I've always loved. But I started off wanting to be, Miles Davis changed my life. My mother was a classical musician, and I grew up with classical music around the house all the time. And, I was listening to Beethoven before I heard the Beatles.
Wow.
But boy, Miles Davis just spoke to me on the radio one evening, and that it changed my life, because I'd already decided to be a trumpet player, a classical trumpet player. I love the heroic quality of the trumpet and the beauty that it had throughout the different worlds that it's existed in classical music, from Bach through Mahler and all of this history of the instrument. But boy, Miles, if you can be soft and sexy also, this was it. This was it for me. I say, yeah, I'll keep the heroic stuff for when I want to do that. But boy, if I could put that mute in and whisper in a girl's ear like that, I'll do that any day. So that
but
really.
Let me ask you a question though.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, because, and Bun, this is almost the same question for you as well, because as both musicians, you said that like at 6 years old, you're sitting down there playing the piano. Do you guys feel like, as both musicians, that it's something that just is in your blood, or can you learn to do it? Like, as a 6-year-old, there's no way I'm sitting down at a piano and playing. Is it something that's just in you from the beginning, or is it something that can truly be taught?
No, I think it can be taught. Of course, it can be taught. But I think there's a yearning inside of you, like, that makes you want to find an outlet. And for some people, like for me, it was writing, right? It was songwriting. But for everyone has that yearning to get out who they are and what they want to give to the world. You just got to find the right outlet. For some people, it's a trumpet. For some people, it's a basketball. You know what I'm saying? Like, it just really depends on what medium you think you can be most authentic to, I would say.
I think that's a beautiful answer. I don't know what more to add to that. That's exactly right for me. I mean, music was called to me, but I've put in the time. There's no question about.
Absolutely.
You got to put in the time to, especially I think with music, because it's such an abstract language. It's very hard to talk about it. You can learn the technology of it. You can learn the mathematics of it. But boy, it takes some real application to turn it into emotion. It really does.
Yeah, I agree. Like with me, like I'm writing words, and you can kind of, look, if you don't know the words, you can look up the definition or find the kind of cultural context that some of that comes through. But like with music, what I've always found amazing, and I've been able to get close to people in the music industry, and it's been amazing. And particularly through this group Krungben, like that, they're from Houston. They're a 3-piece group, and their guitar player, I feel like he speaks guitar, right? I feel like he speaks guitar. Like, and I don't really know how to define that, but I feel like the way that I try to express things and how easily some of those things are easily expressed through me in word and through lyricism, I feel that there are musicians who are so good at what they do, right, that they can get any emotion out. They can get any type of feeling, or like if they're into something, they can make it seem like, oh yeah, no, I really like playing this type of music because I really enjoy this in particular. And if not, if the world's upside down, they can use an instrument and speak to that as well, And so I found that, art, when it's done really well, for one, it inspires people, but then two, it makes people like, man, can I express myself like that? Like I've listened to people play the guitar and the bass guitar and play the piano, and as an artist, you're like, man, I hope what I'm doing is to as high a level of execution as that person is to that particular instrument.
But is that the group with the girl bass player and the drummer, the black guy on the drums? How do you say the name?
Khruangbin. So
I've never known how to say the name. They're phenomenal.
That's Taiwanese for airplane.
Oh my goodness.
They're a very abstract group.
Mark, you should check them out. They're phenomenal.
Yeah, how do you spell that?
Khruangbin, KHRUANGBIN.
That's why I couldn't. That's why I couldn't.
No wonder nobody can pronounce that.
Exactly. But they're amazing. Like the drummer literally sounds like almost like a machine. Like he says so on time. He's like perfect. He's perfect.
Yeah. No, he's other drummers can consider him the human metronome.
Yes, seriously. You'll enjoy it.
Like that's how crazy his timing is. And they shift their timing from 2/4 to 4/4 to 1/3. Like they go very all around the traditional chords and whatnot. But they're an amazing band. Now, Mark, when with you with the trumpet, was that something you felt you wanted to do, especially being inspired by Miles? Did you feel like you wanted to be as creative as Miles, or just wanted to see what you could get out of the trombone as opposed to what Miles was getting?
I think it started off, and I think this happens with a lot of art. You hear something that makes you cry, makes the hair on your arm stand up, makes you feel emotions in a new, wonderful way. And you want to be able to experience that. And then perhaps you want to be able to give that experience to others. And so I wanted to, be like Miles. But then, the great thing about having Miles as a emulate I guess that's the right word, someone to emulate.
We'll take it.
Miles was constantly exploring. Miles started off just in the straight ahead, piano, bass, drums, saxophone, and he ended up, with funk bands and fusion bands and wild ass shit that was just. And I think the spirit of exploration that he showed was just a big and perhaps even more of an influence than the trumpet playing itself. The ability to, because by the time I was in high school, I got a wah-wah pedal for the trumpet, and I was, I was just totally into, all right, where can we take this? Where can we take this music that's so inspiring me? What's my voice in this? Because I think that's, an artist always wants to believe in themselves, and they want to be as much themselves as they can, and that's the ultimate journey, isn't it? To find that. And what that is in art itself, in the art that you choose.
And you started in, obviously, you talked about being inspired by Miles, so you started with jazz. Is that kind of where you ended up? Like how many different genres do you think you kind of walked through with the trombone, trying to see where you could make it work and fit in more than traditionally?
Well, I was a trained classical trumpet player when I was a kid, and I was working professionally. I started when I was 13, but by the time I was out of high school, I was playing in the San Francisco Symphony and the Oakland Symphony, and doing things like that. And but the jazz was always, that's really what I wanted to do. And so I would start hanging out in the jazz clubs or outside the door because they wouldn't let me in. I was too young, But and then eventually just met the cats, the right cats to play with, and just worked myself into the scene, and became, by my mid-20s, I was a working jazz musician as well.
Wow.
And, I ended up playing with Horace Silver for a little bit and did some of the things that you do to make your way into the jazz world. But I was also just interested in electronics and fusion and modern music, David Bowie, Sly and the Family Stone, I mean, Talking Heads, all the stuff of the great music of the late 70s, really just pushed my boundaries, widened them way out. So, I can pick on Wynton because he is the best of all time. But I'll just say that Wynton is he has his idea of what jazz is, and mine is much, much broader. It just is. It just encompasses a whole big world, possibilities.
I wanted to ask you, so what was tell us about what the Frisco jazz scene was like when you were coming up, because there's so many musicians that have come out of that area, like you said, Sly and Santana. Everybody's like, tell me what it was like coming out of around that time.
It was great. It was fantastic. I mean, I'd never played with Sly, but I'd have several old friends who were in his band, and we would play together. I played with Carlos on and off. I played with Jerry Garcia. I played with Van Morrison for many, many years.
Wow.
Because I was the guy that could play in that music, but I also had the classical chops. And so if there was something that needed to cross over, I was the guy to call. And I met all those musicians of that time. And I got to say, San Francisco had a pretty thriving jazz scene at that point.
Yeah.
Joe Henderson was there. Woody Shaw was there. Dave Liebman was there. Pee Wee Ellis. I mean, Pee Wee and I formed a horn section and worked for 25 years together.
Wow.
You know?
Wow. That's crazy.
So when you say you played with these guys, were you on tour with some of these? So tell us you gotta have some great tour stories.
Especially if he toured with Santana or Jerry. I'd love to hear great Jerry Garcia story.
Pee Wee Ellis. Oh my God.
Well, Pee Wee and I, it started with my classical abilities because Van Morrison wanted something that sounded like Penny Lane, right? The Beatles song Penny Lane. There's that trumpet solo in there. Well, that's a classical piccolo trumpet. And that was actually performed by one of the Britain's finest classical, like the London Philharmonic's principal trumpet player, you know. But so Van's sitting in the San Francisco saying, well, how can I get that sound? And so somebody said, well, there's this kid Isham. He does all of that. You should hire him. So I went and I could play that. So I played that for Van. And Van turns to me at the end of the session and says, are you doing any good saxophone players? And I said, well, you're so lucky that I've been playing with Dave Liebman, but David Liebman's roommate living on a houseboat is Pee Wee Ellis. And Van, if you don't know who Pee Wee Ellis is, you know, he was Mother Popcorn. I mean, this is the cat that wrote all those instrumentals for James Brown and he and Maceo, they were the cats, you know, they were the guys in that band. And I've met Pee Wee and I said, I think Pee Wee would be just the best for you, you know, because he understands that whole tradition of R&B in America, all the stuff that Van Morrison loves and worships at the feet of. And sure enough, I brought Pee Wee in and it established a 30, 40-year relationship. You know, up until Pee Wee passed, you know, he was working on and off with Van, and I worked with Van and him for close to 20 years.
Wow.
It's funny when you get into these genres and you start to talk to people, they'll tell you like, well, yeah, I played in this band and this guy played in that band and then this person played backup guitar or whatever. But we would play every Tuesday or every Thursday. We'd get together and we'd go somewhere and play. Is that kind of how that scene was at the time, where all these different guys from different bands ended up just kind of getting together and, you know, jamming out and end up gigging every now and then?
Absolutely. You know, we would hear that Herbie Hancock was in town with Headhunters and that Mike Clark was back at his old house over in Oakland. So we'd go over there and Mike Clark and Paul Jackson would be there and we would just jam for 3 days because they were working at night, but they'd want to play in the afternoon. So we'd play with the Headhunters rhythm section. So, I mean, it doesn't get much better than that, you know.
But back then, everybody didn't necessarily have like a full recording setup. Like you could all easily hang out and commune and play, but
in the garage or something like that.
That's because think about nowadays when artists do that, somebody's recording something and those things turn into singles and possibly albums or songs that they maybe would submit to someone else that maybe they couldn't do with their band or whatever. But so I would imagine there'd be a lot more of us listening to those kind of sessions if that was readily available.
If they were recorded. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the best you could do in those days was a portable cassette machine that hopefully had a halfway decent mic on it, you know, and maybe you might get something, but
it couldn't really encompass what was actually happening in the room for sure.
No. But fun times and learning, you know, that was school, you know, there was no Berklee College of Music in those days. Also, I realized that. So if you wanted to learn any of this stuff, this is how you learned. You went there and you made an ass of yourself in front of Paul Jackson and you say, I better go home and shed, you know, I better really practice this stuff and learn what it was I couldn't pull together on that session, you know, and then the next time you come back and you're better. And that was school.
Wow. That's how freestyling is. Like, guys get together, they come around like for a rapper, because I'm a rapper by background. And that's what we would do. Like, you know, the guys that could really go, we'd all try to get in a room together and somebody put on some beats or whatever, and we would just start going. And then you would see how other people could articulate and how they could pull from places that mentally you had never even considered of pulling from to execute something in real time. And then you go home and it's the same thing. Like, man, that he was in a zone tonight. You know what I'm saying? I got to figure out I might need more cultural references, or I might need read another book or something today that just pulls me mentally in a different direction. But it's amazing when, I guess, you know, they say, steel sharpens steel, so to speak.
Yeah,
but,
exactly.
But to that point, is there ever any doubt? Like, so you're, as a kid, this is what you were going to do. Was there ever any doubt in your mind that, like, what if I can't make a living doing this? Or was there ever a time where you doubted yourself, or was it, I mean, I don't want to say it was easy going, because I'm sure it wasn't. There was a lot of work behind it.
Well, I think there was always times. I mean, my mother was a professional violinist, so my dad taught school. So I could see my mother, her path, but she got a gig in an orchestra, and then she was happy and she taught. But I knew I wanted more than that.
Yeah.
But yeah, are you kidding? There's thousands of times that I didn't, you know, have that sleepless night or the day where I just said, I quit. I'm not touching the horn. Yeah. I mean, I actually quit trumpet for a year because I said, no, this is terrible. I'm not going to do it. But, you know, no plan B, man. There's
this was where you're going.
Gotta work.
I got to say, in that year, I practiced piano. You know, it wasn't that I walked away from music, you know, or something the psychology of the mind is a very tricky area, you know, and I found some things that have helped me over the years, and it got me, I don't know, 5-6 decades now of professionalism. So must have worked. Must have worked.
What started to pull you into the orchestral stuff and arrangements and or writing orchestral scores and eventually getting into the scoring film? What was that path?
That was actually handed to me. I had done some music for a jazz label in Europe called ECM, and ECM had started I was recording with them with a San Francisco group, and they started a classical label. And so I put together some music for electronic instruments and traditional Chinese instruments with a friend of mine who played all the traditional Chinese instruments. And we just wrote this music because we loved it and it was beautiful. And I thought, well, let's put it to ECM and just see, this is perfect, where it's new music. It's, you know, cutting edge stuff. And it was rejected, you know, no, we don't want it. So I remember clearly as it was the other day, I looked at the bank balance in the savings account, and there's $300 in there. And I went down to the local hi-fi shop, and I took the last $200 and bought a cassette duplicating machine and a box of 100 cassettes. Wow. And I went home and I made 100 copies of this piece of music. And I sent it. I gave 50 to my friend to send out to his friends, and I sent them out to the other friends. Wow. And that sort of finished that project for me. Okay, we didn't get it where I want to go, but I'm going to let the world know. You know, there's no internet at this time. There's no, you know, this is how you sent your music out into the world. So, and I did that, and then I said, all right, I'm happy. I've only got $90 left in my savings account. I better go down and get a gig, you know. That cassette from my friend went to a graphic arts designer. A film director had hired that graphic arts designer to make poster art for his film. He came to this guy's house to look at the rough version of the poster art. And he said, yeah, it's okay. I'm going to have you change here. Well, what's that music you're playing right now on the hi-fi? And he said, that's my friend, Mark and Bill. He said, I want their names. That's the sound of my next film.
Man.
Wow.
Just right place, right time, like
right place, right time. Playing in the background, right?
Let's just say, what did I do that you still have to do today and that you could do much better in a much higher volume? I promoted. You know, I wrote something, I produced something, and I promoted it. And I let as many people as I could know that that's who I am, you know, and that offered me my first film.
Wow.
Now, you talk about lack of confidence. This guy walks in and offers me this film. It's a $35 million Disney film, which in those days was a high budget.
So you didn't start
That's
small.
a lot of money.
I
Yeah,
didn't
that's
start
huge.
small. I started like right up at the bloody top.
What was the film?
It's called Never Cry Wolf.
Never Cry Wolf.
And it's a beautiful film. It's based on a Farley Mowat book. And I was just a basket case. I suddenly realized, I watched the film and realized there's over an hour of music that he wants in this film. And it's a blank page. The temporary score that he put in there, he hated. He said, I'm not even going to play you the temporary score. And it was just, I don't know if there's been a stranger period, but thank God I got out of it. So there's a funny story there. I had been living in London because I was working with Van Morrison, and Van Morrison had a breakup with his American management and said, I'm never going to work in America again, and went to London and was touring Europe. So I would go to Europe and tour Europe, and I would spend 8 months of the year there. And then I decided to go back to San Francisco to do this one gig to play some jazz, right? And that's when I got the film. So I'm sitting in San Francisco with a suitcase, right? And none of my stuff to score this film. They put me in an apartment. The apartment was sublet. Yeah, that's the word. Sublet by a minister. This guy, I guess when the plate was low in the church that month, he would go and sublet his apartment and live with his girlfriend. Or a hip, young, modern minister. And I would come back to this apartment every night after, these days of going, I don't know what to do. I've never scored a film. I have no training. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm, talk about, imposter syndrome. I mean, this was just like a nightmare. And I would look up on the books, and he had every self-help book and every religious book, and he had the Bible, and he had the Quran, and he had, Est, and he had all sorts of stuff. And I just started picking them alphabetically, and I came across this book, Dianetics, The Modern Science of Mental Health, and it changed my life. I mean, to be honest with you, because it isolated the fact that all this self-doubt, all this stuff that was telling me that I'm not good enough, it comes from a very specific mechanical place in the mind, and that can be addressed and it can be handled, and you can get rid of it. Even just the knowledge that someone had done that research and that it was very simple and very powerful and pretty unique, that it changed the way I could just face the day. So I don't have to necessarily have this. And I actually tried it. And it's been a huge factor for me in the success that I've had over the last 50, 60 years.
And we'll be right back.
I'm Bun B. I'm a host and a co-owner at Merrick Studios, and we just took things to the next level. Merrick Studios Plus is live. So tap in at wearemerrickstudios.com, get 65% off, and don't just listen, be a part of the show.
And we'll be right back.
Master the art of lyricism with Pendulum Mink, the first school for rap. Learn elite techniques through immersive lessons, real-world exercises, and guidance from hip-hop icons. This is where MCs sharpen their skills and glow boldly on the mic. Ready to level up? Visit pendulummink.com and start your journey today.
And now, back to the show.
If I remember correctly, Dianetics, it speaks on the fact that self-doubt comes from trauma, or like something that you heard around you or something, and it imprints on you at a very young age, and that begins a process of the mind doubting itself. And
that's exactly right, Bernard. You hit that on the head. So that with this very simple technique, you can go and isolate that and run it out and just get rid of it. And then there's that one little voice. Now there may be hundreds of little voices, but that one little voice at least goes away. And if you keep at it and do a correct program of this stuff, the voices can just, and I got to say, it's helped me, I now have, billionaire producers banging on my door. You're late. The music sucks. You're late. I need it tomorrow. I needed it yesterday. Why are you so terrible? Hollywood is not necessarily a kind place. It's not very relaxed here.
Yeah.
But I've actually got to the point where that doesn't trigger the voices in my head agreeing with them. I don't have to agree with that. And I think that's one of the problems with artists is that you get that sort of influence in your environment and you go into agreement with it. Right. And you start to say, I'm not myself. I don't believe in myself. I can't be happy. I can't produce. I can't do things. Whereas if you really ask yourself, you intrinsically do believe in yourself. You can believe in yourself. So I think it was a very, very important point for me and really has helped build this last number of decades of continuing just to explore arts and music,
It's fascinating.
Where I thought you were going to go with that story, and I'm so glad you didn't, is I thought you were going to say I was flipping through some books and there was a How to Score a Film book, and that put me on my route. And that's where I thought you were going to go with that for a second.
No, I still haven't read those books.
Hey, so let's talk about this process, because I'm kind of intrigued of how a process of scoring a film actually works. So you sit down, as you were saying, and do most directors put in a kind of a sample score before you would see it? Or is it typically you're just watching a raw film with no scoring at all?
Most directors will work with what they call a temporary score, temp score. A few people that I've worked with don't like to do it, and it's perhaps a bit more of a challenge. I mean, I'll name drop for a second. I've been very fortunate to work with Jodie Foster, I think, on 3 films with her.
Wow.
And she is one of the few, but I respect her tremendously because she doesn't want some editor or her opinion of what the music should be to overly influence the composer. And she has always trusted me enough to be the guy that she wants my taste involved in her work, that I would find that voice for that film. Now, having said that, there's not a lot of people who do that, because before they hire a composer, sometimes they need to know that this film is working. They need to know who they will even want to talk to about hiring. Does this film going to work better with songs, or is it going to work better with John Williams? Do we need some DJ to come in and plaster all sorts of the latest stuff all over this, or do we need to go to London with the London Philharmonic for 2 weeks? These are big choices, and you don't necessarily have the money to experiment with them. What do? You try things out that'll lead you down that path. You get somebody to put in temporary orchestral music. You lead somebody to put in temporary popular music, or some of the billions of types of other musics that are in between. And that will lead you to, what, this is sort of quirky. It's melodic. It's semi-contemporary. Well, let's call Tom Newman, because he's quirky, he's modern, he's, et cetera, et cetera,
So where do you start though? So that first film you did, you sit down, you watch the whole thing. Do you start at the beginning? Like, at what moment do you start does that start to come together?
Yeah, you watch it, and sometimes it's just I was hired to score a film by Robert Redford. I've scored four of his films, but the first one, I'm still in awe. I'm working with one of the biggest movie stars of all time. My wife, who's exceedingly gregarious, she opens the door and there's Bob Redford, and she's speechless. I can tease her about. And I sit in this darkened theater, and he's doing a screening of this film, and I'm having one of those moments. I'm having one of those moments where I say, I'm the wrong guy. I don't know why I'm here. I don't understand a thing about how to do this film. I'm terrible. I will never work in this town again. I'm going through all that stuff, and then at the very last scene, there was a piece of music that they'd put in as temporary music. And I watched it and I said, that's the answer. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to write. It was an Irish folk song. It was a traditional Irish folk song. And I said, all I need to do is sit down and write like 6 beautiful traditional Irish melodies and make sure that they're not too Irish, that they feel that they can belong in the heartland of America and be Americana. And if I can do that, that's going to make this film beautiful and it's going to make it work. And so that's the value of a temporary score, because it can ignite that thought, that inspirational moment.
And I got 2 questions, and the first one is, with that Irish score, did you call Van?
No.
Oh no, that's his thing. That's one of his things, so I didn't know if you reached out to him or something.
Well, because that film was not specifically Irish. It was rural America, sort of in the upper Montana mountains and place like that. So it had to feel Americana, and there was something about the Irish melody. So I knew that I couldn't be too Irish, that I had to.
Gotcha.
But I have done some Irish work. In fact, I just finished a new TV series, a streaming series that's all about the Irish gangs, and I did call Van. And we talked about working on the main title and some songs for it. Yeah.
Cool. And second question, can you give me a little story or breakdown of how you did Point Break? Because Point Break is one of my favorite movies, and I just need to hear some stories about working with that because that movie's incredible to me.
Well, I think the best story about Point Break is that I got hired to do Point Break because at that point I was the young and up and coming electronic new guy, right? Jazzy electronic music, and so I was like the hip guy. And Kathryn, if nothing else, said, I need the new hip guy. So she hired me, and we got along really well. And we're going along, and I'm writing hip programmed, getting the drum beats out and the whole whole thing. And she was married to Jim Cameron at that time. And as the story goes, I only sort of have this third hand, but the story goes that she took a copy of the movie home that weekend and played it for Jim. And Jim turned to her and said, "What's with this stupid music? You need a bloody orchestral score, a big pounding orchestral score. Stop all this weird hip shit, Get in there and do this like the epic story that it really is."
Yeah.
He came back. We were supposed to meet on her way to the editing room. So we're meeting at 7:30 in the morning, which, for me this is god awful in the first place. And she comes in at 7:30 and says, "I don't want to hear anything new from you." She said, "You need to change the entire score and make it epic and orchestral." And but by this time, I sort of had my shit together mentally, right? I didn't freak out. I said, epic and orchestral. And I just asked her a couple questions to know why. And she said, it's a big story. It's about brotherhood and the belief in your brother and protecting the male bonding. And, this is big stuff. And besides, it's the biggest waves in the world. It's epic. Yeah. It's huge.
Yeah.
And they're jumping out of perfectly good airplanes, with no all that stuff that we all love about that film. And I said, okay. And then if she leaves, and of course I collapse in a nervous wreck, But, I went to work and I did some research. I bought some orchestral scores. I talked to some friends, and just said, all right, how do I do this? And dove back in and rewrote everything.
Wow. And it worked.
It worked.
I got one more. I got one more. I'm sorry to dominate, guys. I got one more.
Right. Go ahead, because I got to bring one out to you.
Very fun.
Please break down some October Sky stuff. That's another phenomenal one of my faves.
Oh, thank you.
I believe an underrated film actually in the history.
I agree. I think it's a beautiful film. And Jake Gyllenhaal's one of Jake's best. He's obviously become a movie star since then. Well, Joe approached me because of a film that I had done. What was it? Oh, the Education of Little Tree, I think, a small independent film about the Indian nation, and they used that as the temporary score for it was called Rocket Boys, I think, in the beginning. And I went to see it, and I said, God, what a beautiful film. I'm so glad you've called me. I'd love to do this, et cetera, et cetera. And that's all my music. And they said, yeah, it's all your music. It's perfect. And I said, unfortunately, it is. It's just almost perfect. And of course, this is very intimidating because now it's like you've already scored the film. and yet you have to do it again. And you presumably have to do it better.
Yeah.
So, but Joe is a wonderful director and very encouraging and very, I think a director's best job is just to be able to talk about the story and to give you enough insight as to the evolution of the emotion and what the story is really about. And my trick is I just write down adjectives. I just, sort of pensive, and then it goes to exultation. And so I'll have a list of adjectives, and just make sure that when I play back that music that I've written, that I feel the presence of those adjectives.
That's interesting.
Wow. I'm sorry. You guys talk.
Go ahead.
I'm going to jump into this one because this was one I really wanted to hear you talk about, and it really lends itself back to you talking about always wanting to go on the, having more of a broad sense of scale and scope when it comes to music and wanting to stretch the boundaries. I would love to hear about Cool World and working with Ralph Bakshi, because you couldn't have been pushing the boundaries of music, film, and everything without talking about a movie like that. Like, that's kind of what the Marvel and all these films that we see that's so cutting edge, like that was like a big leap in filmmaking at the time. And the music, I mean, you couldn't have done a better score for this film because there was a lot of tone setting that you had to do, right?
Absolutely. And God bless you for knowing about that film. I don't know if anybody knows about that film anymore. But I agree. I think it was a bit of a groundbreaking film at the time. It really was. And Ralph is insane. I mean, he's just one of those crazy guys that somehow he got given some money by Hollywood to do this thing. And I think Hollywood was tough on him. You get into the corporate structure of these guys demanding certain formulas, and he was not a formula guy in any sense of the word. A really creative, wild man. And he left me alone a lot, which was, I think, one of the reasons that the score did survive as really sort of a very interesting, thing to do. There's obviously a big 40s component, right? So I went with 40 big band swing music, and it was, believe it or not, it was a fairly low budget movie. They're spending so much on animation, they didn't have a lot for music. So we did it in Germany, believe it or not. We recorded the score in Germany. But I think Stuttgart or Munich had a big radio jazz band, and so they hired them. And it turns out these guys could really play. So we brought a couple of soloists over from London. And then I said, well, the one conceit that I really want to do is I want to put a real modern drummer. And I don't know if you guys know who Terry Bozzio is, but Terry Bozzio was with Frank Zappa and one of the original wild drummers that Frank Zappa had. And he formed a band called Missing Persons. And he has probably developed one of the biggest drum kits ever in the world. Like 3 bass drums, like 15 toms, like just a huge thing. And he's a virtuoso. The guy, there's very few, you mentioned Terry Bozzio to any drummer and they'll go, oh my God, this is the guy. Terry turned out that he was on tour with 2 weeks off. And so we could get him to come to the studio. So I'll never forget having the Munich radio jazz band orchestra, and then Terry's kit, and every musician in the band is going, what the hell is this? But it was great because he brought this tremendous sense of primal rock and funk and just all the stuff that he has become a master at from the Zappa days, to this music. And it brought a whole level of energy and I don't know, just wildness, just sort of hip shit, to the music. And I think that's probably why it sticks in your mind, even though it's intellectually maybe not even noticeable. Just there was a strange kinetic energy in those sessions. And then it was even better because I had him play with the orchestra, the string orchestra, and the orchestra took one look at this set and said, where are we? This is it's great having that sort of a wild drummer playing in the middle of a symphony orchestra. You get an energy and a spirit and a vitality that I don't think you get any other way.
Wow.
No, it was an amazing film. You know what I'm saying? Like you said, it's definitely cutting edge. And I think this is, I don't know if retro-futuristic was a word or a term back then, but that's exactly how that would be the beginning in my mind. You know, it's kind of like Max Headroom, all that kind of weird stuff that was happening. Because this is like 1992, Jeff.
I got to rewatch this now.
Okay.
This is a whole nother layer I got to think about.
Yeah, I think Brad Pitt at the age of like 14 or something.
And then there's a heightened level of sexuality, of course, that comes with Ralph and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
That didn't make it any easier to get this film done. But I think that's amazing. Wow.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah. Kim Basinger, Ralph, Brad Pitt, who else? It was good.
Wow, big cast, yeah.
Yeah.
But they weren't that then, right? Again,
Brad Pitt was unknown. I think Brad Pitt was unknown at this point.
Kim was just, it's kind of like when Cameron Diaz shows up in The Mask. Like she may not be a star today, but she's gonna be a star.
You know where she's headed. Yeah, you know where she's headed. Yeah. Do you play on all your scores, Mark?
I don't play on all of them, no. I mean, all the electronic ones, I do 99% of all the electronic work. Yeah, I do.
Okay.
Trumpet-wise, like I did the movie 42, the Jackie Robinson story.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and that I wrote that for orchestra and solo trumpet, and I had the guy from the London Philharmonic play that. I said, my chops aren't up to this. I need somebody who can really just do it and do it on the day, doesn't have to go in and overdub like I would have to do. But then having said that, I did a film for Brian De Palma called The Black Dahlia, and I did all the trumpet work on that.
Wow.
Because I wanted some improvisation on that. And if I want improvisation, it's better to get me to coach myself through it than to try and coach someone else through it.
Got you.
So 1983 to 2026 today, you're scoring films. Yeah. What has been the biggest change in that industry? Because I'm sure you've seen, or has it not changed? Has it been very consistent?
It's changed a lot. I mean, well, technically, it's a huge difference. I mean, back in the 80s, you had tape machines. That's how you presented any sort of music. You had to get musicians and you had to record the music and you put it on tape and then you mixed it. And now of course you can do it all on a laptop in your car if you have to. So I think just technologically that it's the biggest change.
Yeah.
But it's executives are still the same. Executives are still, and this isn't every single executive, but most of the time executives don't know. So you're up against people whose jobs are on the line, and so they're nervous about their job, and they're trying to have an impact for the good on the film. And that's why I think a filmmaker's role is so important, to have that vision and to know exactly what it is you want and to have the people around you who support you to get what you want. That's been the same probably forever. I don't know if that will ever change, because you have the business side of it and you have the creative side of it. And there'll always be, the difference of approach, different thought processes on both. And you have to navigate that. And that was probably the same in 1919 when, Charlie Chaplin made his first short reel,
Yeah.
I was going to say, we're running out of time, but what I wanted to...
I have
you
one
gotta
last
ask one,
question.
and then I got a one to finish us with.
Mark, have you ever, and if you don't want to, I don't know how to address this. Have you ever been watching a film that you thought was beautifully directed, had amazing acting in it, was edited perfectly, and that you felt maybe you could have done a better job with the score? Or do you not critique people?
Probably.
Okay, I don't know if that's something we want to name names. I was just curious.
I'm not naming any names. I find it very hard to watch a film and not listen critically to
I'm sure.
to the music. I mean, I'm always. I think it's a sign that the music is really well done if my attention goes off of it, and then can come back onto it and say, "Oh, that was really well done." It's that middle ground where I'm saying, "Oh, that's weird."
So
that's the ground I don't like.
Let me give one time, and then let's go. So I'm finding that in the more modern era, I find like the Korean films and a lot of the overseas films, it feels like their focus on score is stronger. Or am I just tripping? It feels like they really focus on the music almost more than the American-made films. Am I right or wrong about that?
I don't know if I have seen enough of all of them to make a real difference, but I do know that in sort of the quote unquote cutting edge American commercial films, there is a move to not be traditional, right?
Yes.
Let's put songs in there, or let's find something that's edgy. And what does that mean? Well, that means it's just like three notes going, and I think you're right. I think that Asian films and European films are a little more traditional in the sense that they still value an emotional score, a character in that score that's going to help tell the story.
Yes. Yeah. You articulated it for me. Thank you. That's what I was feeling.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to steal something from you, Jeffrey, on Mixed and Mastered. And I'm going to have to ask you this. You got to give me your top 3. They could be yours or not yours. Best scored films. Any type of film. God. I know that's a wild question, but like if the 3 that pop in your head and these are the 3, if you want to watch a film for that part of it, these are the 3 you got to watch.
Well, I think I have to go to the Godfather films. I mean, those themes, I mean, those Godfather 1, 2, and I even love 3, but Godfather 1 and 2 are just such works of art. And Nino Rota is probably one of the greatest composers. Not that well known in America, but boy, because he scored all the Fellini films too. So I would have to put any number of Fellini films up with Nino Rota's music for those movies as well. Probably, if you let me put a category like that up as number 2, I mean, I can pick on myself and say, I've done 2 scores of which I'm very, very proud. One is Crash, mostly because it really, really works really, really well. The music is really big part of the film, and it was done for next to no money. I mean, I did that in my bloody living room, that film. Everything.
Not in the car, on the laptop?
Not in the car. No, I got out of the car. But then the other one I have to say, just because it was so much bloody fun, is the big De Palma film I did, which was called The Black Dahlia. And we were in Abbey Road, Studio One, for a week with the London Philharmonic. So it doesn't get much better than that. For a composer to have one of the greatest orchestras in the world playing your music for you in a studio that's iconic as Abbey Road, I mean, that's just like, that's it. There's not much in life that can improve upon that,
Yeah. So what you got to end here. What's next? What do you got on tap? What can you tell us?
I'm just finishing. I've got a couple of little indie films coming, which are really fun. One I'm about to finish with Will Patton and Virginia Madsen in it. And then I'm starting a film with Emma Roberts and Alexander Ludwig. That'll be most of the summer's work. And I've just finished a new series called The Westies for MGM Hulu. About the Irish gangs in Brooklyn in the 80s, which was that's the one that Mr. Morrison rubbed shoulders.
I remember those guys. I'm from New York. I remember. I didn't know them, but I remember hearing that name in New York. I absolutely.
Is that the Hell's Kitchen guys?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, that's going to be a good one.
It's a good one. We got J.K. Simmons and some other wonderful young actors in it. It's a good one. Dope. Good story.
Yes, gonna be dope.
And I have a new album coming out. I do have a new album coming out.
Solo album?
Yes, an actual Mark Isham album. That's not film music related. So I'm going to be hitting you guys up with it when it's done, and when I know exactly the dates and everything.
Yeah,
you'll be getting the whole kit on it. So
you're gonna cut the 100 cassettes and start sending them out again.
That's it. Well, I may up it to 200 this time.
That's cool, man. Do you put out in your you have a self your own label, or you put it out through another label? What do you do?
Well, that's why I'm sort of unable to talk a little more in detail about it. I went out to 3 labels. One has passed, but the other 2 are still So, and if they do it, I'll probably do it for them. If they don't do it, I don't want to go to any other labels other than these particular ones.
Okay.
Then I'll do it myself.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, I wish you the best as an artist. I know it's a negotiation, so I wish you the best. We don't want to mess your deal up, but make sure to circle back to us.
I will.
You decide to release, please.
Yeah, I will. I will absolutely let you guys know when it's out and send copies to you and everything.
Please do.
Mark, thank you for your time. I mean, this is
my pleasure.
Fun, man. This is really
we could have went down every film. We didn't do that, but
I would have been.
could have.
I mean, we could have spent a day talking about working with Bob Redford. I mean, I don't feel comfortable calling him Bob, obviously. You know, I feel like some very, very talented people have trusted you with their projects, and I don't think anyone looks like they were disappointed.
Mm-hmm. I don't think so either. I mean, that's one of the nice things I can say about my career. I've been so fortunate to work with unbelievably talented people, and they're good people. And even though the creative process is a wild ride for all of us, you know, I think pretty much everything I've done, I'm proud of. There's nothing there, and I'm proud of the relationships that I have, and it's been very, very blessed, very fortunate.
Wow, this was fun, man.
This was fun.
Really fun.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming on, Mark. This was a good time.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you very, very much.
Cool. And until next time, leave us your comment, your questions for the show on Instagram at Unglossy Pod or YouTube at Merrick Studios. Check out Merrick Studios Plus for early access to all of our shows and live recordings. And please spread the word, listeners. Until next time, I'm Tom Frank.
I'm Jeffrey Sledge.
And I'm Bun B.
Unglossy is produced and distributed by Merrick Studios.